Imagine this. The year is 1707. The Mughal Empire under Shahenshah Aurangzeb Alamgir has reached a critical point. In real history, his reign marked both the zenith and the beginning of decline for the Mughals, strained by endless wars against the Marathas, rebellions in the Deccan, and the complexities of ruling a vast and diverse subcontinent. But what if the story had turned out differently? What if Aurangzeb, with his iron will, his immense armies, and his vision of dominion, had not just subdued the Marathas, but swept across the entire subcontinent, bringing the southern kingdoms, the resilient Marathas, and even Myanmar under his imperial banner? Tonight, we explore an alternative history, one where the Mughal Empire did not falter in the early 18th century, but instead cemented itself as the unchallenged power of Asia. And trust me, the consequences of such a world are staggering. Stay with me, because this what if might just rewrite the way you think about history. Before diving into this grand scenario, it's important to remember how close Aurangzeb truly was to achieving something extraordinary. Historian Audrey Truschke describes Aurangzeb as a ruler of great complexity, a man both ruthless and deeply devout, whose military campaigns stretched the Mughal state to its limits. His wars against the Marathas consumed decades, and yet, despite his age and failing health, he pushed relentlessly to extend Mughal authority deeper into southern India. As historian Satish Chandra notes, Aurangzeb's empire had grown to encompass nearly all of the Indian subcontinent, yet it lacked the glue of stable administration to hold it together. That lack of cohesion, more than military defeat, was what undid the Mughals. But in this alternate timeline, we flip the balance. Instead of being bogged down in a guerrilla struggle against the Marathas, imagine Aurangzeb deploying new strategies, crushing Shivaji's successors before their tactics matured into a true war of attrition. The Mughal war machine, already one of the largest and best organized in the early modern world, turns decisively southward. Imagine siege after siege falling, from the forts of Maharashtra to the temple cities of Tamil Nadu, the Carnatic, Mysore, and Travancore-Bandhani, the once independent kingdoms of the south, famed for their wealth, shipbuilding, and spice trade, are now firmly under the crescent banner of the Mughals. And Aurangzeb doesn't stop there. With the immense resources of a united India under his control, wealth from Bengals, silk Gujarat's ports, and the Deccan's diamonds, he extends his campaigns further east. The Arakanese and Burmese kingdoms, fragmented and vulnerable, are drawn into the Mughal sphere. By 1700, in this alternate history, the Mughal Empire is not just India's master, but the uncontested colossus of Asia. Pause for a moment to think about this. The Mughal Empire was already wealthier than most European states combined. The French traveler François Bernier once remarked, "The wealth of this empire surpasses imagination." If Aurangzeb had consolidated all of South Asia, the Mughal crown would have commanded resources that dwarfed even those of contemporary France, Britain, and the Ottomans. The so-called Age of Empire might have looked very different. Now, let's play this scenario forward. In reality, the fragmentation of India in the 18th century allowed European powers, like the British East India Company, to slowly carve out influence. But in our alternate timeline, when European traders dock their ships at Surat or Madrid, they are not negotiating with petty princes or rival factions. They are dealing with a monolithic Mughal state ruled by a Shahenshah who brooks no rivals. Historian John F. Richards once wrote, "The Mughal Empire was the greatest Asian empire of its time, comparable only to Ming China in scale and authority. But with the Marathas, the southern kingdoms, and even Myanmar subdued, the Mughals surpass even the Ming." Would Britain have been able to establish its empire in India? Unlikely. The East India Company thrived on division, exploiting quarrels between Nawabs, Marathas, Sikhs, and others. Without these fractures, the company's armies would have been nothing more than mercenaries begging for access to trade. In fact, it's possible that Britain, France, and Portugal might have found themselves paying tribute, not collecting it. Imagine Calcutta and Madras as imperial garrisons, guarded by Mughal troops, their revenues flowing not into London's coffers, but into Delhi's treasuries. Now here's where it gets even more fascinating. A consolidated Mughal empire stretching from Afghanistan to Myanmar would have been strategically placed to dominate global trade. The spice trade of the south, the silk and cotton industries of Bengal, the diamond mines of Golconda. All of these would now serve one master. Europe's hunger for these commodities would have filled Mughal vaults, and with such wealth, Aurangzeb's successors could have invested in naval power. Historian Stephen Dale has pointed out that the Mughal Empire, for all its terrestrial glory, was never a maritime empire. But with southern India secured, ports like Goa, Cochin, and Nagapattinam could have been developed into naval hubs, turning the empire into not just a land power, but a maritime one capable of projecting force into the Indian Ocean. This might have triggered a clash of empires, unlike anything history has seen. Mughal fleets patrolling the Arabian Sea, facing off against the Portuguese, the Dutch, and eventually the British. The Indian Ocean could have become the Mughal lake, just as the Mediterranean once was for Rome. But beyond geopolitics, the cultural consequences would have been staggering. The Mughal court was already a beacon of art, architecture, and literature. Under a unified empire, patronage of Persian, Hindi, and Urdu literature would have flourished even more. Mughal architecture, already responsible for the Taj Mahal, the Red Fort, and Jama Masjid, might have given us an entirely new wave of monumental works, palaces and mosques, that rivaled the greatest creations of antiquity. Instead of a fractured cultural landscape, the 18th century could have been a golden age of Mughal creativity, uniting influences from Bengal to Burma. But what of religion, the most controversial aspect of Aurangzeb's reign? In history, his policies of orthodoxy alienated many groups, fueling resistance. In our alternate scenario, one of two paths emerges. Either Aurangzeb doubles down, enforcing his austere vision across the empire, leading to a more rigid but stable Islamic dominion. Or, perhaps, realizing the impossibility of ruling such a vast and diverse realm, he adopts a more pragmatic policy, blending Islamic authority with local autonomy. Historian Amathar Ali reminds us that Aurangzeb was not merely a zealot. He was a calculating politician, capable of pragmatism when necessity demanded. If the latter path is chosen, the Mughal Empire could have become a far more enduring power, balancing faith with governance. At this point, let me pause. If you're enjoying this exploration of what-if history, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Here, we take the turning points of history and reimagine them, giving you the chance to see how the world might have looked if just one domino had fallen differently. And I want to hear from you. What alternate histories do you want me to explore next? Drop your suggestions in the comments, because some of the best ideas come from you. Returning to Aurangzeb's alternate empire. What would this mean for the wider world? Europe, without easy access to Indian riches, might never have industrialized as rapidly. The British Industrial Revolution was funded in part by the wealth extracted from Bengal after Plassey in 1757. Without that plunder, without the cotton to feed their mills, Britain might have lagged behind. Meanwhile, the Mughal Empire, flush with wealth, could have been the first to mechanize industries, bringing an industrial revolution to Asia, not Europe. Imagine a world where steam engines and gunboats bear the Mughal crescent, not the Union Jack. And what of the Ottoman and Safavid empires, where the mighty Mughal neighbor consolidating power? Alliances might have shifted. A Mughal-Ottoman axis could have checked European expansion in the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean alike. Or, conversely, rivalries between these Islamic empires could have erupted into wars of titanic scale, reshaping the balance of power across Eurasia. Finally, think of the Americas. Without Europe's easy dominance in Asia, more resources might have been diverted westward. Colonization could still have happened, but perhaps at a slower pace. Spain and Portugal might have dominated longer, while England and France, weakened by their failures in Asia, would have remained second-tier powers. The very map of our modern world would look unrecognizable. In conclusion, the alternate reign of Aurangzeb Alamgir conquering all of South Asia and beyond is not just a fantasy. It is a plausible reimagining of history that forces us to reflect on how fragile the turning points of the past truly were. A single successful campaign, a single shift in policy, and the Mughal Empire might have become the global hegemon of the modern era. As historian John F. Richards aptly put it, empires do not fall because they are defeated. They fall because they exhaust themselves. In this alternate history, Aurangzeb's empire never exhausts itself. It thrives, it dominates, and it changes the course of world history. So, what do you think? Would Aurangzeb's empire have been a beacon of stability, or would it have collapsed under its own weight even faster? And which of history should we explore next? Leave your thoughts below. Because history is not just what happened, it is also what could have happened, and sometimes the what-ifs are even more fascinating than reality.